What if the wrong address led to the right life? He knocked on a stranger's door in the pouring rain, just hoping to keep his daughter safe for the night. But the woman who answered had been waiting, though she didn't know it yet. If you love stories about unexpected kindness, second chances, and the quiet ways lives can change, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss a moment. Now, let's begin. Single dad knocked on the wrong door. The heiress looked up and said, "You finally found me." The rain slammed against the windshield in frantic pulses, turning the world outside into a blur of water and darkness. Daniel Harper leaned forward, squinting through the deluge as his truck crept along the unlit road winding through the Vermont hills. His 10-year-old daughter Lena sat beside him, bundled in her hoodie, coughing softly. "Just a little further, kiddo," he said, forcing his voice to sound calmer than he felt. They were lost. GPS was frozen. The turnoff they were supposed to take hours ago had vanished into the woods, and now the truck's engine stuttered every few minutes like it too wanted to call it a night. Another cough rattled from Lena's chest, sharper this time, more urgent. Daniel's grip on the steering wheel tightened. They had left the city for cleaner air, quieter roads, and maybe a chance to rebuild. After his wife Emily died last winter, everything had collapsed: the bills, the job, the house they could no longer afford. He'd promised Lena a fresh start. Instead, here they were chasing a rumor of a cheap fixer-upper cottage that a friend of a friend swore existed just beyond a town called Westridge Population, unknown signage invisible, and apparently hospitality optional. As they turned a bend, the headlights caught the outline of a wrought iron gate and a long, tree-lined drive. A stone pillar bore a weathered plaque, Remington Estate. Daniel hesitated. "This is definitely not the cottage," he muttered. But Lena wheezed again, her breath catching in her throat. That decided it. He turned into the drive. The tires crunched gravel as the truck rolled up to an old colonial mansion, massive, elegant, and dimly lit like a memory that refused to fade. The windows were tall and black against the rain, and ivy clung to the sides like veins on old skin. Daniel parked under the overhang and jumped out, rain soaking him within seconds. He opened Lena's door gently. "Wait here, honey. I'll see if someone can help just for a minute." She nodded weakly. He jogged up the steps and rang the bell. For a moment, nothing. Then came the muffled sound of footsteps. The door creaked open, revealing a woman around 30, dressed in a soft gray sweater and dark jeans, her auburn hair loosely tied back. Her expression was neutral, but guarded her eyes, sharp, calculating. "Yes," she said, her voice low and direct. I'm sorry for the intrusion," Daniel began, brushing water off his jacket. "My name's Daniel Harper. My daughter and I got lost on the road. Her asthma's acting up, and I was hoping maybe we could just sit inside until the storm eases." She glanced past him at the truck, saw the silhouette of the little girl inside. Then back at him. "This is private property." "I understand," Daniel said quickly. "I'm not asking for anything long-term, just shelter for an hour or two. The storm came out of nowhere, and she's not doing well." A pause. Her jaw clenched slightly as if measuring risk. "I have an old guest room," she finally said. "It's cold and dusty, but it's dry." Daniel exhaled. "Thank you. Truly." "I'm not doing this for you," she added, already walking down the steps. "I'm doing it for her." He followed her to the truck. When she opened the passenger side and saw Lena's pale face and chapped lips, something flickered across her expression, recognition perhaps. Or memory. "She needs a doctor," she said quietly. "She has one," Daniel replied. "This weather's just making it worse." Together they carried Lena into the house. The guest room hadn't seen use in years. The sheets were clean, though musty, and the old radiator creaked to life with a few bangs and wheezes. Lena curled up under the covers without protest. Within minutes she was asleep, her breathing slow and strained but stable. Downstairs, Daniel dried off in the kitchen while the woman heated water for tea. The house was a blend of old money and untouched time. grand chandeliers, dust-veiled portraits, and a kind of elegant decay that suggested wealth had once flowed easily here, but now lingered only in bones. "I'm Sophia Remington," she said flatly, pouring hot water into two mismatched mugs. "This was my father's estate. He passed last year." "I'm sorry," Daniel said. She gave a small, dry laugh. "Most people say that when someone they admire dies. I'm not sure 'sorry' applies to a man like him. He didn't push." They sat at the kitchen island. The silence was taut, but not entirely hostile. "You said you were headed to Westridge," she asked. Daniel nodded. "Supposed to be a place for sale just past town. I was planning to start over. Somewhere quiet for Lena. Somewhere clean." Start over from what he didn't answer immediately. Then, softly, grief, debt, noise, you name it. Sophia looked at him for a long time, her expression unreadable. Then she stood up and walked to a nearby drawer. She pulled out a folded piece of paper yellowed at the edges, drawn in careful pen. A map, hand-sketched. She unfolded it on the table between them. Daniel's brow furrowed. The layout looked oddly familiar. Sophia turned the paper toward him. "I saw your notepad in your jacket pocket, the one with your route drawn out. Some of your markings. They're almost identical to this." He pulled his notepad from his coat and laid it beside the map. "Nearly the same." Daniel looked up. "What is this?" "It's something my father left me before he died," she said. "No explanation, no letter, just this." "And what does it lead to?" "I don't know. I gave up trying to figure it out months ago. But then, you knocked." She studied him as if seeing him for the first time. Not just a stranger with a sick child, but something more complicated. "I think maybe you're the first person in years who didn't want anything from this house." A long silence settled between them. Outside, the storm raged on. Inside, something had begun, and neither of them could yet see where the map would lead. The morning brought a fragile stillness, as if the storm had taken its final breath and left the world holding its own. The wet pines shimmered outside the windows of the Remington estate. Inside, the old house moaned in places, pipes settling floorboards, responding to footsteps like whispers from another time. Daniel stirred in the guest room armchair, having refused the bed, choosing instead to sit near Lena throughout the night. He rubbed the sleep from his eyes and looked over at his daughter. Her small frame rose and fell with each breath, her color better now, the wheezing softened. For the first time in days, he allowed himself a sliver of peace. Sophia knocked once and pushed the door open slightly. "I made coffee," she said, softer than the night before. Daniel nodded. "She's better." "I noticed." A pause. "She talks in her sleep." He smiled faintly. "She talks, constantly. Sleeping's the only time I get to keep up." That earned the tiniest lift at the corner of Sophia's mouth almost a smile, but it didn't quite make it to her eyes. They moved downstairs to the kitchen. The smell of dark roast coffee filled the space, mingling with the scent of old wood and something floral lavender, maybe from a forgotten vase in the hallway. Daniel stood at the kitchen counter, sipping from a cracked mug. "You said the map was from your father." Sophia nodded, pulling out the hand-drawn paper again. She unfolded it with care, her fingertips brushing along the edges as if afraid it might disappear. "He handed it to me 2 days before he died. No note, no instructions. Just said, 'You'll know what it means when it matters.'" Daniel studied the map again. It wasn't a precise topographic rendering, more like memory turned into lines and symbols. The drawings were elegant but cryptic. A tree circled in ink, a mark resembling a chapel, a sketch of what looked like a bridge with a broken rail. "My father didn't believe in sentimentality," Sophia said. "He believed in structure, strategy, results. So this—" She shook her head. "It doesn't make sense." Daniel traced one of the symbols with his finger. "But you kept it." She looked away. "I almost threw it out more than once. But something stopped me." There was silence as they both stared at the map. Then Daniel pulled his own notepad from his pocket. He placed it beside hers. Same loops, same roadways. Even one of the circled spots matched a detour he'd jotted down yesterday, a turnoff near a place called Miller's Crossing. "How did you draw?" That Sophia asked, eyes narrowing. "I didn't," Daniel said. "Not from memory. Just followed instructions from a guy I met at the garage in Bartonville. He gave me a paper with alternate directions to Westridge because of a rock slide up north." Sophia blinked. "That man led you here." He shrugged. "I thought he was just being helpful." Sophia leaned in. "Was he an older man? Glasses, gray hair?" "Yeah, actually. Drove a beat-up Buick." Why, she paled slightly. "That's Henry's old car." Daniel stared at her. "No," she said slowly. "That can't be. It was sold after he died. Auctioned off. I saw the paperwork." "Then someone's playing a very elaborate game," Daniel muttered. Sophia folded the map again more carefully this time. She looked up, her voice steadier now. "You and Lena, you can stay here for a few more days. The guest house out back might be better for her breathing. It's got windows on all sides." Daniel studied her face. The guardedness was still there, but it had softened. Just a little. "I appreciate that," he said. "But I don't want to overstep." "You're not," she replied quickly. Then quieter. "You didn't ask for anything. That's rare around here." He nodded, then glanced around the room. "This place. It feels like it's still waiting for something." Sophia didn't answer, but her fingers gripped the edge of the counter. She wasn't sure if she wanted the house to wake up or stay asleep forever. Later that afternoon, Daniel walked with Lena along the edge of the woods behind the estate. The air was damp, but fresh-sweet with pine. Lena had a blanket wrapped around her shoulders and a warm thermos of tea in hand. "She let us stay?" Lena asked, wide-eyed. "She did," Daniel said. "Is she nice, I think?" "She's trying." Lena paused beside a mossy stump, crouching to look at a snail making its slow way across a fallen leaf. "I think she's sad," Lena said suddenly. Daniel looked down at her. "Why do you say that?" "She watches people like she forgot how to talk to them." "But she opened the door. That means she wants to remember." Daniel felt something twist in his chest. This child of his had always seen things he didn't. They walked in silence a little while longer before returning to the house. As they approached the back patio, Sophia was standing at the glass door watching them, not hiding, not pretending to be busy. Just watching. That night, Sophia stood alone in her father's study, map in hand, the fire flickering low in the hearth. She looked at the thick, leather-bound journals lining the shelves, the awards, the photographs of handshakes and boardrooms. The legacy everyone said she should be proud of. But nothing in this room told her who her father really was. She unfolded the map again and whispered to the empty room. "What were you trying to show me?" Dad from the corner of the room, the old grandfather clock struck 9. Outside the house was quiet, but inside her something had begun to stir. Not just curiosity, hope, not for a fortune or a mystery solved, but for the chance just maybe to unearth something good from everything she had buried. And for the first time in a long while, Sophia didn't feel entirely alone. The next morning greeted them with sunlight slicing through mist like truth-cracking silence. The air smelled of earth and new beginnings. Daniel stood at the edge of the guest house porch with a mug of reheated coffee, watching Lena chase butterflies around the overgrown lawn in her socks. Her cough had quieted overnight. Her cheeks had regained color. It was the first time in months she looked like a kid again. Sophia stood a few feet behind him, arms across a shawl draped over her shoulders. She'd been watching them quietly, as though trying to solve a puzzle whose edges didn't quite fit. "She's better," she said. Daniel turned. "She is." "This air's doing more than any inhaler could back in the city." Sophia nodded, once then glanced down at the mug in his hand. "You're drinking from my father's Yale reunion cup." Daniel looked at it. "Huh. Well, it's sturdy, and slightly pretentious." Sophia cracked a smile she didn't mean to, then looked away before it could settle on her face. He gave her a moment before speaking again. "I can fix that gate hinge on the barn if you want. It's hanging off." "You don't have to," she said. "I know," Daniel replied, "but I want to. Lena needs some fresh air and space for a few days, and if I can pay back your kindness in bolts and screws, it's a fair trade." Sophia hesitated. Then, actually, I might have a better trade in mind. She disappeared into the house and returned with a small bundle of folder, thick with papers, a second map, this one marked in red pencil, and a stack of old photographs. She laid them on the picnic table beneath the oak tree. Daniel followed her and sat across from her. "I've been staring at these for over a year," Sophia said, not looking up. "The map, my father left some deeds and donation receipts, and a photo of him standing outside a small building in Westridge with a boy next to him. I don't recognize the boy. I don't even know what the building is. I've looked it up, but it doesn't exist anymore." She paused. "I don't know what he wanted me to see, or if it even matters." Daniel said nothing. He studied the photo. The boy was about 10, slight build, grinning in that awkward gap-toothed way kids did when they didn't know how to pose. But the eyes, they weren't just happy. They were grateful. Daniel looked up. That building. I think it used to be the Millers Crossing Community Center. Sophia blinked. "How do you know that I lived near here as a kid, before I moved to the city? Used to go there with my mom sometimes. They had free tutoring and peanut butter sandwiches on Tuesdays." Sophia absorbed that silently. Then she leaned in her tone, shifting. "Here's my offer. Help me figure out what my father was doing with this map, these places, these people. In return, you and Lena can stay here as long as you need." Daniel stiffened slightly. "That's generous, but I don't want charity." "It's not," she said firmly. "It's a job, a partnership if that's easier to swallow. I need someone who sees things differently than I do. Someone who isn't caught in the same frame I've lived in my whole life. You're outside it. That's what I need." Daniel looked down at the photo again, then at Lena, now lying on her back in the grass, pointing at clouds and naming them like constellations. He looked back at Sophia. "This would just be for a few weeks," he said. "Agreed. And you're not going to put our faces on some foundation brochure, are you?" Sophia rolled her eyes. "God, no. I hate those." He smiled. "Then you've got yourself a deal." They shook hands across the table. It wasn't dramatic. No music swelled in the background. No moment of revelation. But something shifted, like two tectonic plates that had quietly pressed against each other for years finally clicking into place. That afternoon, Daniel started repairing the barn hinge, and Sophia brought out 2 folding chairs and a box labeled Dad's Off-Grid Notes. Lena sat between them with colored pencils, occasionally glancing over and asking questions like, "Did Mr. Remington ever go to space?" And "Why did people write letters when they had email?" Sophia answered the first with a dry, "He never left the atmosphere," and Daniel answered the second with, "Because typed words don't smell like old paper and honesty." Lena scribbled both answers into her drawing of the house, where she'd drawn a version of Sophia with a speech bubble that read, "He never left the atmosphere, but his kindness did." Sophia stared at the drawing for a long time, then turned back to the map. Daniel, watching her out of the corner of his eye, saw the way her fingers slowed on the paper, the way her shoulders dropped ever so slightly. He saw a woman unraveling, not breaking, but unfolding like parchment long stored, finally exposed to light and air again. And he knew what that felt like. That evening, as twilight painted the yard in fading gold, Sophia stood in the study again. She touched the spine of one of her father's ledgers, then pulled it out. Inside were numbers, donations, some anonymous, others under pseudonyms. But all were real, all traceable, and every one of them pointed to the same theme, quietly giving, discreetly restoring, refusing public credit. Sophia whispered to herself, barely audible in the echoing room, "You were never just the man in the headlines. Were you? Dad outside?" Lena's laughter rang through the open window, and for the first time Sophia didn't feel like she was standing guard over a mausoleum. She felt like she was standing on the edge of a map she hadn't known was hers. And maybe, just maybe, she wasn't meant to walk it alone. The Remington truck once used to haul crates of pharmaceuticals now carried more modest cargo, an old wooden crate of tools, a folded lunch bag packed by Lena, and a printed version of the mysterious map annotated in both red and pencil-scribbled notes from Sophia and Daniel. They drove in silence along a country road lined with maples just beginning to blush gold. The fall air hummed with quiet promise. It had been 3 days since their deal. 3 days of late-night studying, cross-referencing ledgers and property deeds. 3 days of unexpected warmth between people who a week earlier had been complete strangers. Their first stop was a faded sign on the edge of a town that read Miller's Crossing, closed until further notice. Beyond it, a chain-link fence surrounded what remained of a red brick building with broken windows and weeds curling up its foundation. Sophia stepped out first, her boots crunching over gravel. She stared at the building like it had once insulted her. This was the old community center, Daniel said, following her. They used to give out warm meals, tutoring, and blankets in the winter. My mom brought me here when I was a kid. First place I read a full book cover to cover. Sophia glanced at him. Which book, Where the Red Fern Grows? He chuckled. Didn't admit I cried until I was 30. A faint smile tugged at her lips. They approached the fence. The padlock was old, rusted. Daniel glanced around. No one's touched this in years. Sophia pulled a letter from her coat pocket, one they had found among her father's old files. It was dated 12 years ago and addressed to a woman named Celia Burns, the then director of the center. Celia, use this money for what matters. Please don't name anything after me. If we fix what's broken quietly, it stays pure. H, underneath, was a check stub, 75 $. He kept it off the book, Sophia murmured, holding the paper delicately. No tax write-off, no headlines. Daniel leaned against the fence. He gave a place like this another 5 years of life. That's not a donation. That's preservation. Sophia nodded slowly. He believed in this. Quietly. Her voice was distant, like she was speaking through time, not just memory. They circled to the back of the building, where the fence had partially collapsed. Inside, dust motes drifted through broken beams of light. Torn posters still hung on the walls, Literacy Night Wednesdays, Family Meal Fridays. A rusted filing cabinet sat against the wall. Daniel pulled at the drawer. It creaked open. Inside was a photo. Sophia took it, her breath catching. It was her father, 10 years younger, smiling gently beside a young boy with a cast on his arm. The boy was reading aloud from a book. "That's not you, is it?" she asked Daniel. "No, but it could have been." On the back, scribbled in faint ink, "Don't just fund places, go sit in them." Sophia blinked hard. Their next stop was an old bookstore tucked between a bakery and a barber shop in the heart of Westridge. The bell over the door chimed as they entered, the scent of old pages and vanilla binding glue hitting them like a familiar hug. An elderly man with thick glasses looked up from behind the register. "We're open, but barely," he grunted. Mr. Tom, Sophia asked. "I believe you knew my father, Henry Remington." The man straightened slightly, his gaze sharpening. "I haven't heard that name in years." Sophia stepped forward. "We found records. He sent funds anonymously to this store." Tom leaned back, eyes glinting. "He saved it. Twice. The first time when my rent spiked after a development company tried to turn this block into condos. The second time when I broke my hip and couldn't run the place for 3 months. I came in one morning and the bills were paid. No note, just handled." He pointed toward a bookshelf behind them. That entire wall, children's books and YA. He said if kids didn't find stories early, they'd spend their lives chasing ones that don't exist. Sophia walked toward the shelf and let her fingers trail across the spines. A wrinkle in time. Hatchet. The Giver. Daniel joined her. "I used to borrow Hatchet from my school library over and over until the librarian told me to keep it." "I hated books," Sophia said quietly. "Too slow. Too abstract. My father once told me I'd only ever fall in love with stock portfolios. Daniel looked at her, and she turned to face him. He was wrong. Outside the bookstore, they sat on the bench with Lena, who was finishing a cookie Tom insisted she take. Sophia exhaled deeply, the kind of breath you don't realize you've been holding for years. I always thought he wanted me to take over the company. Be ruthless, logical. He never said anything else. Maybe he didn't know how Daniel said. But people love in the ways they were taught. Sometimes the words don't match the actions. Sometimes the map doesn't come with a legend. Sophia looked at him sharply, then softened. You're more poetic than you let on. He shrugged. I've had to say a lot of hard things in simple ways. Lena doesn't do metaphors. I do too, Lena said from the bench. Like that time I told you the hospital smelled like old pennies and broken promises. Daniel winced. Okay, fine. She does metaphors. Occasionally, terrifyingly well. Sophia laughed, and for the first time it wasn't cautious or polite, it was clear and full, like it came from somewhere unguarded. That evening, as they drove back to the Remington estate, the sky stretched wide and pink across the hills. The truck was quiet, but not heavy. Comfortable. Sophia looked out the window, her voice soft. He wasn't building an empire. Daniel glanced at her. He was building bridges, she said. Daniel nodded once. And maybe he left one for you. She met his eyes, and for the first time, Daniel saw not the heiress, not the woman guarding something fragile, but the daughter of a man who had finally begun to speak. Not through words, but through the kindness he left behind. The attic smelled of dust pine insulation and secrets. It was the kind of stillness that made you whisper even when no one was around. Sophia stood at the top of the ladder, flashlight in hand, eyes adjusting to the dim. Cobwebs traced corners like forgotten lace. She hadn't been up here since the funeral. Maybe longer? Below her, Daniel held the ladder steady while Lena wandered through the hallway below, humming off-key and pretending not to listen. You sure you want to do this now? Daniel called up. Sophia took a breath, then exhaled. No. Still, she stepped forward. The box had been marked Personal, SR, in her father's handwriting. She found it tucked behind a stack of crumbling ledgers and yellowing investment reports. She knelt beside it. Her fingers hovered over the lid, then slowly peeled it back. Inside, bundled in a faded red ribbon, were letters. Dozens, maybe more, some addressed to strangers. Others to names she vaguely recognized, her childhood piano teacher, a former driver, an anonymous donation recipient. But one envelope was different. Worn edges, no stamp, just her name printed in block letters. Sophia. She stared at it like it might vanish. Daniel had climbed halfway up the ladder now. You okay? Sophia swallowed. I found one. He didn't ask what it said. He didn't need to. She sat on the floor and opened it slowly, as if afraid the truth might hurt more than silence. Sophia, you always saw me as someone with power, a man who made rules, expected results, and rarely explained why. And you're right, I did those things. I made myself into someone sharp because the world is dull without resistance. But that isn't all I was, and it's not all I wanted you to be. I gave you the company because I didn't know how else to give you trust. I criticized your choices because I feared the world would do worse, but I never wanted you to lose your kindness in the process. If you're reading this, I hope you found someone who brings out the part of you that doesn't measure everything in returns. The part of you that remembers the feel of dirt under your fingers, the sound of a child laughing, the silence of being truly known. I'm sorry I couldn't say this while I was alive, but I was afraid you wouldn't hear it from the man you thought I was. Love, always. Dad Sophia's throat tightened. Her vision blurred. She pressed the letter to her chest, breath shaking. All the years of quiet resentment, of feeling like a transaction in her father's portfolio, suddenly they dissolved into the simplest truth. He had loved her. He just hadn't known how to show it in the language she understood. She stayed there for a long time, curled around the letter like it was a lifeline. When she finally descended the ladder, Daniel didn't speak. He simply offered her a chair in the hallway and sat beside her on the floor, knees drawn up, elbows resting. After a while, she whispered, "I spent years thinking he didn't believe in me, that he only saw me as an asset." And now Daniel asked gently, "I think—" She hesitated. "He saw me too clearly, and he didn't want the world to ruin what he saw. So he tried to prepare me for it by turning me into him." She let out a bitter laugh, which of course ruined it anyway. Daniel nodded. "We don't get to choose how our parents teach us love. We just have to decide what we'll do with what they leave behind." Sophia looked at him. "What did yours leave you?" "Silence," Daniel said after a pause. "And a workbench in the garage. It took me 20 years to realize they were the same thing." Sophia smiled sadly. From the living room, Lena called out, "Are you guys going to cry all night, or can we bake cookies?" Daniel chuckled. "Apparently, we've got a deadline." Later that evening, as the scent of chocolate chip cookies filled the air, Sophia sat at the kitchen island rereading the letter under the soft glow of the pendant light. She had read it 3 times already, but the words still found new places in her to settle. Lena perched on the counter beside the mixing bowl, swiping at the batter with her finger. "You know, she said my mom used to write me notes when I was sad. Stick them in my backpack." Sophia looked up. "Did they help?" "Sometimes," Lena said, licking her finger, "but mostly because I knew someone remembered I existed." Sophia's breath caught. Daniel looked up from the oven. "She still has them all, in a shoebox labeled Proof." Lena grinned. "Because sometimes you forget you matter, so you need proof." Sophia stared at her, blinking back tears again. Then quietly she reached for the stack of her father's letters. One by one she began sorting them by name. "What are you doing?" Daniel asked. "Giving other people their proof." The next morning, Sophia stood by the mailbox at the edge of the long driveway, a manila envelope in hand. Inside were 5 of the letters sealed, addressed, ready to be returned to the people her father had never reached. Daniel approached, holding a thermos. "You sure about this?" "No," she said, smiling. "But it feels right." They stood together, watching the mail truck crest the hill. Sophia held out the envelope. Daniel didn't take it. Instead, he looked at her and said, "You don't need to carry all this alone." And she believed him. For the first time, she believed someone meant it not as a pitch or a promise, but as a truth, whole and simple. Sophia placed the envelope gently in the mailbox and closed the lid. A wind swept through the trees. The leaves fluttered down like quiet applause, and somewhere inside her a door, long shut, had finally opened. The phone rang just after dawn. Sophia blinked awake in the quiet stillness of the guest house. Light was filtering in through the lace curtains Lena had insisted they hang the night before, claiming this place needed a little softness. The old wooden floor beneath Sophia's bare feet was cool grounding. She reached for her phone on the nightstand. Incoming call, Wesley Heiress, board chairman. Her stomach clenched. She let it ring twice more before answering. Wesley. Sophia. His voice was brisk, clipped. "We need you back." She sat up straighter. "I told you I was taking time to time's up. The acquisition with Elcor is stalling. Legal's a mess. Investors are panicking. You're still CEO on record. They want your voice in the next call." Sophia closed her eyes. "When today, noon, your home office will be reactivated. We've already sent a courier." He didn't wait for a response before ending the call. Sophia sat there, phone in hand, the hum of the dial tone replaced by the sudden roar of memories, the echo of boardroom's fluorescent lights, the bone-deep fatigue of always having to be the most prepared person in the room. She hadn't missed any of it, but now it was clawing its way back in. By the time Daniel arrived with Lena holding a brown bag of cinnamon muffins from the bakery in town, Sophia was already pacing the main living room, hair tied tight, a thick binder open on the table. Lena ran to the kitchen with glee, but Daniel lingered in the doorway, watching Sophia as she scribbled notes in the margin of a shareholder summary. "I know that look," he said quietly. Sophia glanced up. What look? The one people get right before they walk back into a burning building. She didn't reply. He stepped closer. They called yes. And I'm expected to clean up a deal they fumbled, stabilize investor trust, reassure the market. Of course you are. Sophia paused. I'm good at it, Daniel. I don't doubt that. But I hate it. She added the words, surprising even herself. Daniel waited. Sophia ran a hand through her hair. For so long I believed that being in control was the only way to stay safe. That if I could anticipate every variable, I'd never feel powerless. Her voice broke slightly. Daniel moved to the arm of the couch, sat down. What changed, Sophia looked toward the kitchen where Lena was quietly singing a made-up song about muffins and honey. Then she looked back at Daniel. You two did. He said nothing, giving her the space. Sophia sat across from him, her voice low. This house, these letters, my father's ghost in every drawer, I thought if I solved the mystery, I'd get closure. But what I found instead was a version of myself I'd forgotten how to be. Daniel met her eyes. Then, don't walk away from her. Sophia gave a shaky laugh. You make it sound so easy. It's not. I know that. Choosing a different life is terrifying, especially when the world keeps handing you a crown and saying, put it back on. He paused. But maybe you don't need to burn your old life down. Maybe you just stop letting it own all of you. At noon, Sophia sat in front of the laptop in the sunroom, her father's map tacked to the wall behind her, visible only to her, not to the corporate grid of faces lining the screen. Ms. Remington Wesley began. Thank you for joining. We've reviewed your absence as compassionate leave, but need confirmation that you are re-engaging. Sophia's voice was even. Define re-engaging. He blinked. Excuse me, you want my name, my authority, my image to stabilize your narrative. But do you want me? The person, a murmur, ran through the conference. I'll offer you a compromise, she said. I'll sign off on the Elcor merger strategy provided two things happen. First, a 10% increase in community reinvestment from post-acquisition profits. Second, full transparency on executive severance packages for review. Publicly. Wesley blinked. That's highly irregular. But legal, she said, and ethical. If we're going to call ourselves visionary, let's act like it. There was a long silence. Then muted nods appeared across the screen. Wesley stiffened. Very well. Sophia smiled faintly. Then that will be my final contribution. A beat. You're resigning. I'm rebalancing. She ended the call. The air outside was crisp and gold with late afternoon light. Sophia stood on the porch, the phone still in her hand, her fingers shaking just slightly. Daniel appeared beside her. How'd it go? I may have just bought back a piece of my soul. He grinned. Did they cry? No. But they blinked more than usual. They stood in silence a moment before Sophia asked, You ever feel like you've been living someone else's life, and just now remembered who you are? All the time, Daniel said. Usually right before I burn a frozen pizza, and Lena reminds me I used to be able to fix an engine blindfolded. Sophia laughed this time, fully freely, and it felt good. Not perfect, not solved, but honest. That night they built a small fire in the backyard. Lena roasted marshmallows and told ghost stories involving antique teapots and haunted tax forms. Daniel watched Sophia move through the night like someone relearning her body, her place in space, her presence in a world that no longer needed to be cornered by glass walls and conference tables. As the fire burned low, Sophia whispered, I didn't fix the company. Daniel leaned toward her. You fixed something better. She looked up, what he tapped her chest, the person who thought she had to carry it all alone. Her eyes glistened. No boardroom, no spotlight, just stars, smoke, and a man who saw her not as a CEO or a Remington or a mystery to be solved, but as someone worth staying for. And in the quiet crackle of the fire, Sophia finally allowed herself to believe she was. Daniel lay awake that night on the old couch in the guest house, staring at the cracked ceiling as the fan above him spun in slow, uneven circles. Lena was fast asleep in the bedroom, her soft breathing rising and falling like waves. But Daniel's mind was anything but still. He'd heard every word Sophia said on the porch earlier, every tremble in her voice as she stood between the life she knew and the one she was just beginning to claim. And something inside him had twisted not from fear or resentment, but from the haunting recognition of a truth he'd buried. They weren't supposed to stay. He and Lena had come to Westridge for rest, for healing, not for roots, not for a future, and certainly not to entangle their modest, unpredictable world with the daughter of Henry Remington and her 1,000-acre legacy. But there was something else, something he hadn't expected. Belonging, not in the house, not in the land, but in the way Lena smiled here, in the way Sophia had laughed around the fire, in the way the silence between them wasn't empty anymore. He turned toward the window. A light was still on in the main house. Sophia's silhouette passed behind gauzy curtains, pacing slowly. Maybe she couldn't sleep either. Daniel sat up. He looked down at his hands, calloused, nicked from years of work of holding broken things together. He had no business holding her hand, or staying in her world. He'd always believed that. But what if that belief had kept him smaller than he needed to be? He rose, walked softly into Lena's room, and knelt beside her bed. "Hey, Bug," he whispered. She stirred. "Daddy, I need to ask you something." Her eyes opened hazy with sleep. "Is it morning?" "Not yet. I just need to know. If we left tomorrow, how would you feel?" Lena blinked. "Are we in trouble?" "No, sweetheart, not at all." She was quiet for a long time. Then, simply, would Sophia be sad? Daniel swallowed. "Maybe." Lena nodded, thoughtful. "Then I'd be sad, too." He brushed a strand of hair from her forehead. "Do you like it here?" "I like the way the wind sounds through the trees," she said. "I like the smell of the wood in the guest house, and I like how you laugh more." Daniel's throat tightened. "I do." She nodded sleepily. "You didn't used to. Not since Mommy." He kissed her forehead, then stood. Lena reached for his hand. "Don't make your decision because you're scared, Daddy. Make it because you're kind." He stared at her. "Where did you learn that?" She smiled. "From you." The next morning, Daniel found Sophia on the back patio with 2 cups of coffee and a clipboard filled with notes. She looked up as he approached, her expression unreadable but expectant. "I need to talk to you," he said. She gestured toward the chair across from her. "I figured." He sat. The silence between them held weight but not tension. "I've been thinking," Daniel began, "that maybe it's time for us to move on." Sophia's lips parted slightly. She didn't speak, just waited. "I don't want Lena to grow up thinking we belong where we weren't invited to stay," he said carefully. "And this place, this life, it's yours, Sophia. Your father built it. You're rebuilding it. We were just passing through." Her voice was low. "Are you sure that's all this was?" Daniel hesitated. "Then no, I'm not." Sophia looked away, jaw clenched. "I've spent so long making decisions based on survival," Daniel said, "and I've done a decent job of keeping Lena safe. But I'm starting to wonder if playing it safe is keeping us small." Sophia's eyes shimmered. "So stay." He looked at her vulnerable in a way that made him feel raw. "But what if I mess it up? What if I drag this place down or make things harder for you?" "You already make things easier," she whispered. "Not by fixing stuff. By being here. By being you." Daniel exhaled as if something unspoken had been released. Sophia reached for the clipboard and tore off the top page. "What are you doing?" he asked. She handed him the blank sheet underneath. "Starting over. No roles, no assumptions. Just a blank page. If you stay, we build something that belongs to all of us." Daniel stared at the paper. He took the pen she offered, wrote 3 words. "The Map Room." She smiled. "That's the name." He nodded. "It's not a house. It's not a foundation. It's not about your father or my past. It's about creating a place where people find direction again." Sophia looked at him, tears brimming. "Like we did." He nodded. "Exactly like we did." That afternoon, Daniel and Sophia walked to the barn where Henry's tools still hung on the wall undisturbed. Daniel opened the dusty cabinets, inspecting what could be salvaged. Sophia cleared a corner of old crates and rolled open the heavy barn door, letting sunlight pour in. Lena came running down the hill from the orchard, holding up a small hand-drawn map of her own. "What's this?" Sophia asked. "It's a map of here," Lena said proudly, "but instead of roads and places, it's people." She pointed. "This is Daniel. He's the builder. You're the dreamer. I'm the explorer." Sophia knelt beside her. "And where does it lead?" Lena traced her finger to the center of the page. "Here," she said, "to the place where kindness lives." Daniel and Sophia looked at each other, their eyes soft with something unspoken but understood. Not love declared, but love discovered. Not a promise of forever, but the choice of today. And sometimes that's where the real maps begin. 1 month later, the barn no longer smelled like dust and disuse. It smelled of pine sawdust, lemon oil, and fresh beginnings. The wide double doors now swung open to reveal a transformed space. Sunlight streamed through newly cleaned windows, dancing across shelves of donated books, handmade wooden benches, a reading nook with floor pillows sewn by volunteers from the town, quilting circle, and a small coffee station stocked by the local bakery. The sign above the entry read simply, "The Map Room, a place to pause, remember, and begin again." Sophia stood near the back wall, clipboard in hand, watching as Daniel adjusted the final screw on the sign. She had traded her heels for sneakers, her tailored blouse for a soft cardigan and jeans, and her guarded expression for something warm, unguarded, open. "You hung it straight," she said. Daniel gave her a look. "I always hang it straight." She smiled, then tucked the clipboard under her arm. "The mayor's coming at noon. And Channel 7 wants to do a segment on local projects turning abandoned spaces into community hubs." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "You sure about that? The whole no attention thing was kind of your father's brand." Sophia stepped forward, looking around. "This isn't about attention. It's about access. It's about people knowing they have somewhere to go when they forget where they're headed." She paused, her eyes settling on Daniel. "Besides, I think he'd understand. This isn't his anymore. It's ours." Daniel nodded, turning to check a loose window latch. "And Lena. She's already recruited 3 other kids for the Explorer team. They're mapping every trail behind the orchard and naming each one based on how it makes them feel. She told me yesterday one's called the Worry Path. Because it winds a lot," Sophia said, "and takes longer than it should. But it ends at a clearing with wildflowers." Daniel chuckled. "She's 10, going on 60. Sophia leaned against the post beside him. "You know, I thought I'd spend the rest of my life climbing higher, reaching further. That was the goal. Always one step ahead." She looked around the map room. "But maybe the most important thing I'll ever build is a place where people feel safe to stop." Daniel studied her. "It's strange, isn't it? How the more we let go, the more we finally hold what matters." Sophia turned to face him. "You've become very philosophical lately." He grinned. "Just well-rested for the first time in 5 years." They laughed quietly, the kind of laugh that doesn't rise too high or demand attention but wraps around you like a soft coat. By noon, the map room buzzed with gentle energy. Locals drifted in, farmers with weathered hands, young parents holding toddlers, an elderly couple who'd lost their grandson and found a new rhythm in tutoring children who needed reading help. The mayor gave a brief speech. The local reporter asked questions, but Sophia kept her answers focused on the community. Daniel stayed mostly in the background, managing the tool station, helping a boy with a learning delay fix a broken book cart. Sophia watched him from across the room and saw for the first time not just a man who had stumbled into her life, but one who chose to stay. Every single day. She caught herself thinking, Maybe this is what family feels like when you build it from truth, not expectation. Lena ran up holding a folded piece of paper. It's ready. Sophia knelt down. What is it? It's the first official map of the map room, Lena said proudly. I made it for people who feel lost. Sophia opened it. There were cartoonish drawings of all the spaces reading Corner Tea Station Hug Zone, which Daniel insisted wasn't a real thing but still received frequent traffic. In the center was a circle colored in soft gold crayon. Sophia pointed to it. What's this? Lena smiled. That's where people go when they don't know what to say. It's called the Quiet Heart. Sophia blinked. That's beautiful. Lena shrugged like it was obvious. Everyone needs somewhere to be silent. That's where things start to heal. That evening after the last car pulled away and the lights were dimmed, Sophia and Daniel sat on the porch steps outside the barn, watching the sky blush into dusk. Sophia leaned back on her hands. Do you ever wonder how we got here? Daniel tilted his head toward her. Every day. Not just the place she said, the people we became. You with your toolbox and steady hands. Me with my clipboard and too many shoes. Daniel smiled. You haven't worn heels in weeks. I don't miss them. He nodded. Good. A silence settled between them, rich with things unsaid. Then Daniel turned to her, voice low. I think your father would be proud. Sophia looked at the barn, golden light glowing softly from within. Maybe. But I'm starting to care more about whether I'm proud of me. Daniel reached out and gently took her hand. Not as a grand gesture, not with fanfare, just simple and certain. She looked down at their hands, then back at him. You're still not scared? She asked. Of this he squeezed her hand lightly. Terrified. But staying, he nodded. Always. Later that night, Sophia sat at her father's desk in the main house. A candle flickered beside her. The map he'd drawn so many months ago lay unfolded before her. She traced the roads with her fingertip, every place they had visited, every lesson they'd learned. And yet the map had never truly been about geography. It had been about values, about kindness, about presence, about seeing people for who they were, not what they could give. She picked up a pen and added one more circle right over the land where the barn stood now. She labeled it simply, Found. Then she leaned back in the chair and whispered, Thank you, Dad. I finally got it. The wind stirred the curtains gently like an answer, like an embrace from the past. And for the first time in years, Sophia felt truly home. The first snow came softly dusting the orchard like powdered sugar and frosting the roof of the map room in white. It arrived earlier than usual, for Westridge blanketing the last orange leaves and muting the world with a hush that felt almost holy. Inside the map room, warmth radiated from the refurbished fireplace Daniel had painstakingly rebuilt brick by brick. The space was alive with quiet activity. An older woman named Judy read aloud to a group of children curled in beanbags. A teenager painted a mural on the back wall. A man, recovering from grief, drank tea at the Quiet Heart Circle without saying a word. And nobody needed him to. Sophia stood near the welcome table, watching it all unfold like a scene from someone else's dream. And yet it wasn't someone else's. It was hers. Theirs. Every week brought more faces. Some old, some new. Some cautious arriving, with nothing but silence. Others exuberant, coming with ideas, offerings, wounds, and hope. The map room had become a living thing, a heart with many doors. She turned as Daniel entered, brushing snow from his jacket cheeks, pink from the cold. In his arms were firewood and a grocery bag with cinnamon scones, Lena's request for the Friday gathering. He caught her eye, smiled, and tilted his head toward the supply room. I fixed the draft near the east window, he said. Again. Pretty sure this place breathes on its own. Sophia laughed. So it's alive. Daniel set down the bag. Very much. He turned toward her, his voice quieter. You doing okay? She nodded. More than okay. I feel full. Not in a loud way. Just steady. He looked around at the room. "This place is better than a boardroom." She smiled. "This place is a boardroom. It just votes with its heart." Outside, Lena walked with two other children through the orchard trails, each carrying clipboards and markers. Sophia had printed real trail maps for them, but they insisted on renaming everything again before the year ended. They returned later, cheeks flushed, feet muddy. "This one's called Almost Brave Trail," Lena announced. "Because it's short, but there's a huge branch you have to duck under like an adventure." Sophia raised an eyebrow. "You've renamed the same path 3 times this month." "Paths change depending on how you feel," Lena said matter-of-factly. "Didn't you teach me that Sophia opened her mouth, then shut it, then nodded?" "Can't argue with that." Daniel ruffled Lena's hair as she passed. "Hey, explorer." Lena beamed. "You should come next time. We're looking for kindness rocks. Kindness what they're rocks people paint with nice words and hide in the woods. When someone finds one, they can keep it or re-hide it." Daniel smirked. "Sounds like emotional treasure hunting." "Exactly," she said, running off. Sophia watched her daughter twirl once beneath a pine tree before disappearing into the map room again. She turned to Daniel. "She's happier here than I've ever seen her. She's not the only one." Later that evening, the 3 of them sat on the front porch of the guest house, now adorned with soft white lights and a small wreath Lena had made from twigs and buttons. Hot cider steamed in their mugs. The stars shimmered in a sky so clear it looked like it might break. Sophia rested her head on Daniel's shoulder. "Do you ever think we stumbled into something meant for us?" she asked. Daniel thought for a moment. "No, I think we chose it. Every day, even when it was hard, especially when it was hard." She looked up at him. "I almost ran." "So many times?" "I know. Why didn't you?" Daniel turned to face her. "Because I've spent most of my life holding back for fear of not being enough. And then I came here and you let me be useful. Not flashy, not extraordinary, just needed. That's rare. I wasn't going to walk away from that." Sophia blinked back tears. "Also," he added with a small grin, "Lena said she'd ground me if I left." They both laughed. Then Sophia whispered I was so scared to let people in. I didn't realize the walls I built to keep others out were also keeping me in. Daniel kissed her temple gently. "You're not inside those walls anymore." The next day, Judy, the older woman who read to the children, approached Sophia at the fireplace. She held a small wrapped box. "This came for you," she said. "No return address." Sophia opened it to find an old compass. Brass, heavy, worn from use. Taped beneath it a small note for when you forget the way forward. Trust the things that don't move. Love, time, and the places that stay kind. No signature. But Sophia didn't need one. She turned the compass over in her hand, the needle steadying as if it had found true north not on the map but inside her. She pressed it to her chest, breath catching. Then she looked up, eyes shining, and whispered, "Full circle." Daniel stepped beside her, his voice soft. "What did it say?" She held up the compass, eyes locked on his. It said, "We're not lost." That evening, as snowfall returned, and children painted kindness rocks by the fireplace, and neighbors swapped recipes for stew and apple pie, and laughter echoed off wooden beams once filled with silence, Sophia stood in the center of it all, and realized her father's map hadn't led her to a place. It had led her home. Not a house, not an inheritance, not even a legacy, but a life she had built choice by choice, heart by heart. And now she wasn't walking it alone. Not anymore. It was a Sunday morning when Daniel discovered the last clue, not by design, but by something far older and more sacred than planning quiet curiosity. He'd been sorting through a dusty cabinet in the back of Henry Remington's study, intent on repurposing the space for the map room's first writing workshop. Sophia was meeting with a librarian from town about a mobile book cart, and Lena was outside mapping the Courage Trail, which looped through the East Orchard, and according to her only showed up when someone felt ready to walk it. Daniel opened the cabinet doors expecting more ledgers or forgotten pens. Instead, he found a thin wooden frame wrapped in brown parchment and twine. Tucked beneath it was a sealed envelope marked with a single word, "End." He turned it over in his hands, pulse rising with something close to reverence. For a long moment he stood frozen, unsure whether he was interrupting something sacred. Then he unwrapped it. Inside the frame was a piece of thick, hand-textured paper. Ink lines drawn with care shaped a simplified map of the Remington property, this time focused on the land itself, not the outer world. The orchard, the old barn, now the map room, the walking trails. And at the center of it, all circled in gold ink, was the main house. But not labeled house. It was labeled Return. Daniel unfolded the note. If you've made it here, then you've walked far enough to ask the right question. What was I building this whole time? I used maps to hide what I couldn't say about regret, about longing, about the daughter I didn't know how to hold without pressing too hard. I taught the world how to follow my mind, but I failed to teach my child how to follow my heart. So I left this one final marker, not to guide you forward, but to bring you back, to remind you that sometimes the most courageous path is the one home. Love always, Dad. Daniel sat back slowly, the page resting in his lap like a confession or a prayer. His throat tightened. He knew he couldn't be the one to carry this last message. It had to come from him, but it had to be read by her. That evening after dinner, Daniel took Sophia's hand and led her into the study. Lena followed behind, unusually quiet, sensing something sacred in the moment. Daniel handed Sophia the frame and the note without saying a word. Sophia stared at it, lips parted. As her eyes moved across her father's words, her shoulders began to tremble, not with sorrow, but with the kind of recognition that only comes when you realize someone loved you more than you ever knew, and in a way you didn't know how to ask for. She sank into the chair beside the fireplace, still holding the frame, her eyes brimming. Lena climbed into her lap and wrapped her arms around her. He really did love you, didn't he? Sophia nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. He did, in his own way, and all this time I thought I needed him to say it. Daniel knelt beside them. Turns out he showed it. Sophia looked at the map one last time, then reached for a pen and wrote a single word beneath Return. Stay. The next morning, Sophia walked alone to the barn. Snow clung to the trees like lace, and the map room, silent for once, stood like a chapel. She stepped inside and stood in the center of the space her father once ignored, now transformed into something he would have admired without needing to understand. She walked to the Quiet Heart Circle and knelt, pressing her hand against the wood. I forgive you, she whispered. And she meant it. Not because it erased the years she'd spent aching for a father who didn't know how to see her, but because she now saw him, fully, clearly, tenderly, and she saw herself too, not as a legacy to uphold or a role to fulfill, but as a woman who had finally come home to her own heart. That weekend, Daniel and Sophia hosted the first founders' gathering in the map room. Neighbors brought pie and folding chairs. Teenagers read poems. One of the older volunteers told a story about how her late husband had once fixed a radio at this very barn 50 years ago, and now somehow she felt like she was hearing him again through the laughter echoing off the walls. Midway through the event, Lena stood up and cleared her throat. I made a new map, she announced. She handed copies to everyone. Each person's name was written on the page with a line leading not to a building or a road, but to a feeling, kindness, hope, music, listening, laughter, tea. I wanted to make a map where nobody gets lost, she said, only found. A silence followed. Then came applause, not thunderous but steady, like rain on a roof, like warmth in winter. Sophia pulled Lena into a hug and whispered something only she heard. Daniel watched them, arms crossed gently the same way Henry once had in an old photo by the orchard. The room, this life, was whole. Not perfect, but complete. That night, after everyone left and the map room lights dimmed to a soft glow, Sophia stood at the porch and looked up at the stars. Daniel came to stand beside her. I was thinking, she said, maybe we don't have to name everything. Maybe we just live it. He slipped his hand into hers. But if we did name this moment, this feeling, what would we call it? She smiled. Arrival. He leaned in close. Then we're finally here. Snow fell again, gentle and slow. And in the hush between one breath and the next, Sophia closed her eyes and knew she wasn't following her father's map anymore. She was living her own, and she had arrived exactly where she was meant to be. Winter melted gently into spring the way healing sneaks in, not with fanfare, but with quiet persistence. Buds pushed their way from thawing earthbirds returned in song, and the map room opened its windows to the scent of wet soil and new beginnings. Sophia stood by the porch railing of the main house, her eyes fixed on the orchard beyond. The trees were just beginning to blossom, soft pink and white, the same palette her mother once used in the watercolor paintings now hanging in the hall. She hadn't looked at those paintings in years. Now she stopped before them often. Below the hill, Daniel was helping Lena and two other kids patch a small bridge they'd built over a seasonal stream. The children had named it The Crossing and painted a sign that read, "Here is where fear becomes curiosity." Daniel looked up and caught Sophia watching. He raised a hand. She raised hers back. She had once believed strength meant holding the world at arm's length. Now she knew better. Strength was letting people matter to you, letting them stay, letting yourself stay. Inside the house, a familiar box sat open on the dining room table, the last of her father's unsent letters. She had mailed most of them dozens. Some had been returned, others answered with tears, with stories, with reconciliation. Some recipients never replied. That was okay. Not all kindness requires recognition. Some simply needs to be released. This letter, however, had no address, no name, just a single line on the envelope. For the one who brings it full circle. Sophia had wondered if it was meant for her, or Daniel, or maybe someone who hadn't yet arrived. And then, one morning, Lena. Of course it would be. Lena had picked up the envelope, studied it, and whispered, "I think it's for the next person who knocks." Sophia had smiled. "Then we'll keep it safe, until they do." That afternoon, the map room buzzed with preparation for its first anniversary celebration. Neighbors brought potluck dishes. Children strung handmade bunting from tree to tree. A musician from Boston had driven 2 hours just to play acoustic guitar beneath the barn's rafters. Sophia adjusted a sign by the welcome table. Daniel was taping up Lena's new map, A Year of Firsts. It charted the people who had visited the projects that bloomed the hearts that shifted. She had drawn it not with roads, but with tiny symbols, each one representing a person, a story, a moment that had meant something. Daniel stepped back to admire it. She's made a map that doesn't lead to a place, it leads to meaning. Sophia nodded. She gets that from you. He gave her a look. Don't underestimate what she's picked up from the woman who turned an empire into a refuge. Sophia smiled. Maybe the difference was never as far apart as I thought. As twilight fell, fairy lights flickered on and laughter spilled across the lawn like music. Sophia stood by the map room door, welcoming neighbors, hugging familiar faces, shaking hands with newcomers. She had always hated small talk. Now she treasured every conversation. They weren't filler anymore. They were invitations. Near the fireplace, Lena was reading aloud from her journal. Her voice, once shy and uncertain, now rang with quiet confidence. This place was a barn, she read. Then it was a maybe. Then it became a memory waiting to happen. A hush fell as she closed the book. Sophia's eyes stung. Daniel slipped beside her, whispered, "Your daughter just rewrote the definition of hope." Later that night, after the last guest had left and the stars pressed gently against the dark sky, Sophia walked back to the porch of the main house. She sat on the top step barefoot, listening to the soft hum of crickets and the creak of the wind through the trees. Daniel joined her, handing her a mug of mint tea. "Hard to believe it's only been a year," he said. Sophia nodded. "Feels like longer. Feels like I've been walking toward this moment for a lifetime." They sat quietly. Then Daniel turned toward her. "Do you remember the night we met?" "In the rain," she said softly. "You knocked on the wrong door." Daniel smiled. Or maybe the right one, just not the obvious one. Sophia reached into her sweater pocket and pulled out a small object, the compass Henry had left behind. She handed it to Daniel. "What's this for?" he asked. "It's yours now," she said. "I used to think it pointed me to my father. But it didn't. It pointed me to the person I became after him, and to the people who helped me get there." Daniel turned it over in his hand. "You don't need it anymore. I have what it was trying to show me," she said. "You, Lena, this home, myself." He closed his fingers around it, then reached for her hand. "I never thought I'd find a place where I could just be," he said. "Not fix, not prove, just be." "You're not the only one," Sophia whispered. They sat there, hands intertwined, watching the wind carry petals from the orchard trees through the moonlight. And then a knock. Not loud, just one. They both looked toward the path. At the map room door, a figure stood. Nervous, hesitant, holding a backpack. Sophia stood slowly. Daniel looked at her. "Ready." She smiled, heartful, steady. "Always." Together they walked down the path. Sophia opened the door. The figure looked up and said, "Hi, I don't really know where I'm going." Sophia stepped aside and answered gently, "Then you've come to the right place." And somewhere inside the house a letter waited, sealed, unaddressed, ready for the next heart that needed a map, not to find a destination, but to remember they were never truly lost. They just hadn't knocked on the right door yet. We'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from? Let us know in the comments below, and if this story touched your heart, don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more heartfelt tales just like this. Thank you so much for spending your time with us today. Until next time, stay kind, stay hopeful, and keep believing in the beauty of unexpected moments.